The first few weeks of the Galactic Peace Accord had been deceptively quiet. Diplomatic representatives from across the galaxy, including humans, had gathered in a vast station orbiting the red planet. Marate. Despite all the talks of unity, there was an unspoken tension between species. But none of them could have predicted what happened when a new, mysterious faction arrived. On that day, the shimmering silver ships of the Circa, an alien species of extraordinary intelligence and mystery, descended into the station's landing bays. Their ships were unlike anything humanity had ever seen, sleek, elongated vessels that seemed to pulse with energy, as though alive. The Circa had been rare visitors in galactic history, and their sudden arrival sparked both awe and fear among the Circa. However, there was one that drew immediate attention. Her name was Lyra, and she was unlike any other Circa the humans had ever encountered. Tall, graceful, with ebony skin that seemed to absorb the surrounding light, her presence radiated an unsettling beauty. The humans whispered her name behind closed doors, the Black Widow. Lyra's reputation, while shrouded in myth, was terrifying. Stories of her ruthlessness had been passed down through centuries. Some said she was a master of manipulation. Others claimed she could weave illusions that trapped minds. But the most chilling rumor, and the one most feared, was that she was a hunter. A predator who had survived countless wars and challenges, always coming out on top. And the price of her defeat was death. No one knew for sure what her role was on this peace mission. But Lyra had arrived with a single purpose: to ensure that the Circa had no rivals in the galaxy. Her reputation alone was enough to send ripples of dread throughout the station. People who had crossed paths with her in the past spoke of her chilling gaze, which could freeze even the bravest of warriors. Some even claimed that she could sense the deepest fears of others and use them against them. For days, the representatives from the various species stood in nervous silence. Every interaction with Lyra was fraught with an uncomfortable tension. She moved like a shadow, always observing, always calculating. And yet, despite her unsettling presence, there were few who dared to openly challenge her. After all, she was the Circa's most powerful member. One evening, as the station's dim lights flickered, a group of human diplomats gathered around a table, discussing the delicate matter of trade agreements with the Circa. The conversation was civil, almost too civil. Everyone was on edge, unable to predict when a seemingly innocent comment might set off a chain reaction that would bring about disaster. Suddenly, without warning, a loud crack echoed through the room. A door slammed open, and a figure appeared in the doorway. It was Lyra, her dark figure framed by the stark light from the hallway. The room fell silent. "Why do you all pretend?" Lyra's voice was a soft, smooth whisper that carried across the room. "You are all afraid of me." Her words were like a blade, slicing through the tension in the air. The humans exchanged uneasy glances, their hearts pounding. "Don't flatter yourself." One of the human delegates, a tall man named Commander Ellis, spoke up, trying to sound confident. "We are not afraid of you." Lyra tilted her head slightly, her eyes narrowing as she studied him. There was something in her gaze, something cold and calculating. Ellis felt a shiver run down his spine as Lyra took a step forward, her movements almost too fluid, like a predator closing in on its prey. The other humans shifted uncomfortably, but none dared to speak. "I wonder," Lyra mused, her voice barely audible. "Is it fear or something else? Perhaps curiosity? The human need to test limits, to push boundaries." She paused, watching the room closely. "You all think you understand power, but I am power. I have seen empires rise and fall, and I remain. You cannot understand the nature of my kind, what we are, what we have survived." Commander Ellis opened his mouth, about to retort, but Lyra's fingers flashed with lightning speed. In an instant, the room's lights dimmed. The entire station seemed to freeze. Do you know what it's like to feel the heat of 1,000 suns, and then nothing? She asked, her words almost a whisper. The room's air felt stifling, as if they were being suffocated by her very presence. And then, as quickly as it had begun, the lights flickered back on. Zlira stood still, watching them, her eyes gleaming with something almost predatory. Ellis could feel the sweat on his brow, but he managed to hold his ground. I don't know what you want, but threatening us won't get you what you're after. Zlira smiled, a cold, unnerving smile. No, it's not a threat. It's a warning. Never, ever test the limits of a being like me. For I can make your worst nightmares come alive, and none of you would even see it coming. The humans remained silent, but their hearts raced with fear. This was no longer a simple negotiation. This was a battle of wills, and Zlira was the one who held all the cards. With one last chilling glance, she turned and left the room, the door closing silently behind her. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances, the weight of her warning hanging heavily in the air. Commander Ellis knew one thing for sure now. The Circa had come to test the galaxy. But Zlira? She had come for something far more dangerous. She had come for blood. The tension in the station only deepened after Zlira's chilling warning. For the next several days, everything seemed to be on edge. The usual hum of negotiations was replaced by whispered conversations and nervous glances. Diplomats, once eager to secure their positions and alliances, now found themselves more focused on keeping their distance from the Circa, particularly Zlira. Commander Ellis, who had initially tried to maintain a facade of confidence, was now haunted by the encounter. Every time he closed his eyes, he could hear her voice, soft and sinister, warning them all not to test her limits. It wasn't just a matter of politics anymore. It was survival. The peace talks continued, but it was clear to Ellis that something was amiss. Zlira wasn't just here for diplomacy. She had a different agenda. And while everyone else focused on trade routes and security pacts, Ellis couldn't shake the feeling that the Circa were playing a far deeper game. One evening, after the last meeting of the day, Ellis made his way to the bar, seeking refuge in a drink to unwind. He found himself alone in a dimly lit corner, staring into his glass. But the sense of unease still lingered, as if something unseen was waiting to strike. As he sat, nursing his drink, a shadow fell over the table. He didn't need to look up to know who it was. Zlira. Her presence was like a storm approaching, and the air around her seemed to grow colder. Commander Ellis, she said, her voice low and teasing. You look lost in thought. Careful where you allow your mind to wander. Not all paths are safe. Ellis stiffened but didn't look up. I'm fine, just unwinding. Zlira smiled, the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. Of course, Commander. But you should understand by now, there is no unwinding when it comes to the Circa. Our presence changes everything. Ellis finally met her gaze, his face betraying none of the anxiety he felt. What do you want from us, Zlira? Why are you really here? Her smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. You misunderstand, Commander. We are not here to ask for anything. We are simply observing. And as for your kind? She leaned in closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. You should be asking yourselves why you're here in the first place. Do you think this peace is for your benefit? Or ours? The weight of her words sank in like a stone in Ellis's chest. So this isn't about peace, he said, his voice steady. Despite the unease growing within him, it's about power. Zlira chuckled softly, her eyes glinting with a predatory light. Oh, Commander, always so quick to judge. The universe is about balance. Power is just a tool, like any other. But when you have it, you understand what it really means. The Circa understand it better than anyone. Ellis leaned back in his chair, struggling to contain his frustration. Then what do you want? What does the Circa need from us? Zlira's gaze darkened, and for the briefest moment, Ellis felt as though the room had grown colder still. "I think you misunderstand me again, Commander. The Circa don't need anything from you. You are simply collateral. This is a game of survival. Those who cannot play the game will be left behind." Ellis's mind raced. He had heard rumors of the Circa's true goals, not peace, not cooperation, but a silent war for control of the galaxy, a war masked by diplomacy and delicate negotiations. But hearing Zlira speak it so plainly made the truth even more terrifying. "You'll be the first to fall," Zlira said, standing up slowly, her eyes locking with his. "You're kind. Always are. You want to know why? Because you think you can control everything. But you can't. Not against us." Ellis didn't move as she turned to leave, but the words lingered in the air, like a curse he couldn't shake off. It was becoming clearer by the day. Zlira and the Circa weren't here for peace. They were here to tear down the old order, to rewrite the rules of the galaxy. The next day, Ellis tried to regroup with his fellow diplomats, but the weight of Zlira's words still gnawed at him. His mind kept returning to the question, why had the Circa chosen to show themselves now? The timing of their appearance at the peace talks was too precise, too calculated, and Zlira, she was no mere diplomat. She was a harbinger of something far darker. Back in the station's command center, Ellis and his team worked tirelessly to assess the situation, but their reports were fragmented and incomplete. The Circa had been subtly influencing the talks, driving wedges between the human and alien factions without anyone fully realizing it. They had taken control of the station's communication lines, intercepted private messages, and even manipulated certain trade routes to provoke tension between the different species. But it was what they uncovered next that shook Ellis to his core. Hidden deep within the Circa's encrypted files was a single document, a map of the galaxy with a strange set of coordinates marked in red. And under those coordinates was a chilling phrase, the Black Widow's Nest. Ellis stared at the screen in disbelief. What was this place? Why did the Circa keep it secret? And most terrifying of all, what did Zlira have to do with it? The answers were now within reach, but so was the danger. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and Ellis realized that the next move in this game would be one that no one could walk away from unscathed. The galaxy wasn't just being watched, it was being hunted. And Zlira, the Black Widow, had just begun her hunt. The next few days felt like the calm before a storm. Commander Ellis could feel the change in the air as the station seemed to grow quieter, more tense with each passing hour. The diplomatic talks, once bustling with activity, had come to a near halt. The factions were on edge, the uncertainty of the Circa's true intentions hanging over every decision. Ellis spent his nights researching the cryptic map he had found in the Circa's encrypted files. But no matter how hard he tried, the red-marked coordinates led to a dead end. They weren't on any of the known maps, and when Ellis tried to track them using the station's computers, the data came back as corrupted, almost as if someone was actively trying to erase any trace of the location. The phrase, the Black Widow's Nest, still echoed in his mind, but what did it mean? Zlira's warning was clear. The Circa didn't play by the same rules as the rest of the galaxy. To them, peace was just another weapon to use. But to what end? One evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant horizon of Marate, Ellis walked alone through the quiet corridors of the station, seeking answers. He needed someone who could help him understand what was going on, someone who knew the darker history of the Circa. That's when he remembered Dr. Callan, an exobiologist and historian who had been studying ancient species for decades. She had once spoken about the Circa and their elusive, terrifying reputation. If anyone could shed light on what the Black Widow's Nest meant, it was her. Ellis found her in the small, dimly lit research bay. She was hunched over a table, her face illuminated by the glow of several screens. She didn't notice him at first, lost in her work. When she looked up and saw him standing there, her face hardened. "You're here about the Circa, aren't?" she asked, her voice low and cautious. Ellis didn't waste time. "I need to know about Zlira, about the Black Widow." Callan stiffened at the mention of her name. "I knew you'd come around to asking about her eventually. What do you know?" Ellis hesitated for a moment before answering. "I found a map, coordinates. The Black Widow's nest, what does that mean?" Callan's eyes darkened, and she motioned for him to sit. "You've heard the stories, of course. The Circa are known for their cunning, their power. But Zlira, she's something else entirely. She's a legend among them. And the Black Widow's nest? That's where she's from. It's not just a place, it's a concept, a way of life." Ellis sat, his mind racing. "What do you mean? A way of life?" Callan sighed, leaning back in her chair. "The Circa evolved differently from most species. They're predators, not just in the physical sense, but mentally, emotionally, and politically. Zlira, in particular, is a living example of their most dangerous traits. The Black Widow's nest is an ancient stronghold, a place where they breed and train their most lethal warriors. It's hidden, isolated, and fiercely protected. But it's not just a location. It represents their core philosophy, survival of the fittest. Anyone who enters the nest becomes part of their cycle, whether they want to or not." Ellis frowned. "You're saying Zlira was bred for this?" Callan nodded slowly. "Not just bred, Commander. Chosen. The Circa believe that power comes from evolution, from dominance over others. Zlira was born into this cycle, raised to be the deadliest, most intelligent, and most strategic of them all. And she has never known defeat. The Black Widow's nest is a place where the Circa test their warriors, and once you enter, you're either forged in their image, or you perish." The weight of Callan's words settled in. Ellis could feel the gravity of what he was hearing. Zlira wasn't just an agent of the Circa's influence. She was a living weapon, created to manipulate, control, and annihilate those who stood in her way. But why was she here, in the midst of these peace talks? And why had she chosen to make her presence known? Callan continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Zlira isn't here by accident, Commander. She's here because she's been ordered to make sure no one questions the Circa's authority. The Black Widow's nest is the embodiment of their philosophy. And Zlira will not rest until the galaxy is bent to their will, or until everyone who stands against them is eliminated." Ellis leaned forward, gripping the edge of the table. "But why now? Why choose the peace talks as the place to strike?" Callan looked around nervously, as if the walls might be listening. "The Circa have been biding their time. The galaxy is shifting, Commander. The old powers are weakening. The human species, the Corvians, the Rethan, they're all rising in influence. The Circa have always been at the top, but their rule has been challenged for the first time in centuries. Zlira was sent here to ensure that any spark of rebellion is snuffed out before it can catch fire." Ellis stood up abruptly, his mind racing. This was bigger than he had realized. Zlira wasn't just a player in this game of diplomacy. She was the weapon that the Circa had unleashed to maintain their stranglehold on the galaxy. The peace talks were a facade, a cover for something far more sinister. "Where is the Black Widow's nest?" Ellis asked urgently. "How do we stop it?" Callan shook her head. "You can't stop it, Commander. No one can. The nest is a place of unimaginable power. And if you try to challenge Zlira or the Circa now, it will be the end of you." Ellis felt a chill run through him. "Then, we're all doomed." Callan's eyes met his, and for the first time, he saw genuine fear in them. "No, Commander, not all of us. But some of us will have to make a choice, and soon." As Ellis left the research bay, a heavy silence followed him. The walls of the station seemed to close in, and he couldn't shake the feeling that they were all standing on the precipice of something irreversible. Zlira's game had just begun, and it was a game with no rules. The galaxy was in more danger than anyone realized, and time was running out. The Black Widow was already hunting. Ellis couldn't sleep. The weight of Callan's words lingered in his mind like a shadow he couldn't outrun. The Circa weren't just interested in peace. They were hunting, and Zlira was the predator. The realization hit him like a cold wave. The galaxy wasn't a place for peaceful coexistence anymore. It was a battlefield, one where the rules had already been rewritten by those with the most power. As he paced his quarters, the faces of the other diplomats flashed in his mind. They were all in this, all playing a game they didn't fully understand. And most of them had no idea how close they were to losing everything. The Circa weren't here to negotiate. They were here to dominate. Ellis's mind kept returning to the coordinates. The Black Widow's nest. He had to find it. He had to know what Zlira was planning, before it was too late. Early the next morning, he made his way to the station's command center, determined to gather any information he could. The corridors were eerily quiet, as if the entire station had taken a collective breath, waiting for the next move in the unseen game. It wasn't long before Ellis was sitting in front of a terminal, working his way through layers of encrypted files, hoping to find something more concrete about the mysterious nest. But as he began to decode one of the encrypted messages, a soft chime interrupted him. His heart skipped a beat. "Commander Ellis," a voice said from behind him. He turned to see Captain Vera, the station's head of security, standing in the doorway. Her face was drawn, pale. "We have a problem." Ellis stood up immediately, his pulse quickening. "What is it?" Vera hesitated before speaking. "It's Zlira. She's made a move. We lost contact with the communications relay about an hour ago. Everything is offline." Ellis's blood ran cold. "How? What happened?" "We're not sure," Vera said, her voice tense. "But we've intercepted a transmission. It came from the Circa's private channels. They've cut all communication with the station. It's like they've isolated us completely." Ellis's mind raced. This wasn't just a move to disrupt talks. This was an act of aggression, and it could mean one thing. Zlira was preparing for something much darker. She wasn't just controlling the narrative now. She was controlling the station itself. "Get me a team." "We need to investigate the Circa's ship," Ellis said, already moving toward the door. "If they're isolating us, it means they're planning something. We have to find out what it is, now." Vera nodded, her expression serious. "I'll assemble a team, but Commander, be careful. Zlira is dangerous. If she's behind this, we may not be able to stop her." Ellis clenched his jaw. He had no choice now. The game had moved beyond talks and diplomacy. Zlira had made her first true move, and if they didn't act fast, the Circa's control would spread like wildfire. They made their way to the Circa's docking bay, where Zlira's ship lay, sleek and ominous in the docking bay's shadows. The ship, which had initially seemed so graceful and peaceful, now looked like the belly of a beast ready to strike. Ellis and his team moved quickly, their footsteps echoing in the empty hallways of the station. As they approached the ship, the door to the Circa vessel slid open with a hiss, revealing a dark interior. A faint blue light pulsed from within, casting eerie shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. "We're going in," Ellis said quietly. The others nodded, hands hovering near their weapons, their faces drawn with apprehension. They stepped inside, and immediately the air felt different, colder, heavier. The walls seemed to vibrate with some kind of low hum, and the faint scent of something alien lingered in the air. They moved deeper into the ship, their every step echoing through the hollow corridors. Suddenly, the sound of a door sliding open broke the silence. Zlira appeared before them, her figure emerging from the shadows like a ghost. She was dressed in black armor, her presence commanding and regal, yet there was an almost palpable sense of danger radiating from her. "Did you think you could stop me?" she said, her voice soft, almost mocking. "You're too late." Ellis felt his heart race. They were cornered, trapped in her domain. He stood his ground, his voice firm. "What do you want, Zlira? Why are you doing this?" Zlira took a step closer, her eyes locking with his. "I told you, Commander. It's not about what I want. It's about what must happen. The Circa will rule this galaxy. Your kind, you are simply the first obstacle in our way." Ellis couldn't help but feel a sense of dread creeping up his spine. And the Black Widow's nest? What does it have to do with all of this? A cruel smile spread across her face. "The nest is where we are born. It is where we are made into something stronger than you can ever imagine. The Circa are not merely conquerors, we are the future. You're right to be afraid, Commander. What's coming is beyond your comprehension." She took another step forward, her presence so overpowering that Ellis felt like he was suffocating. "And now you're here, standing in the heart of it all. This is where it begins. Where you will either submit or be erased." Ellis fought too. Control his breathing, his mind racing. The pieces were falling into place now. Zlira wasn't just trying to take control. She was trying to create something. An empire that would rule through fear, with her as its queen. Before he could react, the lights flickered, and Zlira's cold laugh echoed through the chamber. "You're already too late," she said again. Her voice like a deadly whisper. The realization hit Ellis like a punch to the gut. The peace talks weren't a diversion. They were the beginning of a war. And Zlira was already one step ahead. It was no longer a matter of stopping a single faction. The galaxy was about to change forever. And no one, not even the humans, were ready for what Zlira and the Circa were about to unleash. Ellis's mind raced as Zlira's words sank in. She was right. They were too late. The station, the peace talks, they had all been part of a far bigger plan, one that no one had seen coming. The Circa had been laying the groundwork for months. And now, with the communications cut off and the station under their control, the galaxy was on the brink of chaos. Zlira's smile never wavered as she stood before Ellis and his team. The air was thick with tension, her presence commanding. It wasn't just her physical beauty that unnerved him. It was the power she radiated, the sense of inevitability. That hung around her like a storm cloud. "Do you know what's coming next, Commander?" Zlira's voice was almost a whisper, but it held a chilling certainty. "The nest is awakening. The Circa will rise again. The galaxy will be ours." Ellis forced himself to steady his breathing. He couldn't afford to show weakness now. "Why don't you just end it, Zlira?" he asked, his voice as calm as he could manage. "Why not wipe us all out now and save the trouble?" Zlira's eyes flickered with something dark, something almost amused. "You think it's that simple? No. I will let you live long enough to watch everything you've built fall apart. You'll see your precious peace talks crumble, your alliances break, your species become obsolete." She paused, letting the words sink in, then added with cold finality, "And when it's over, you'll beg for mercy, but I will not grant it." Her voice was like ice, and for a moment, Ellis could feel the weight of her promise pressing down on him. He knew now that this wasn't just about power. Zlira wasn't trying to conquer the galaxy. She was trying to reshape it, to rebuild it in the Circa's image. A galaxy where only the strong survive, and those who couldn't keep up were discarded without a second thought. "Zlira, you don't have to do this," Ellis said, trying to reason with her, though his voice sounded more like a plea than a command. "There's still time. You don't have to destroy everything." Zlira's laugh was soft, almost like a hiss. "You misunderstand, Commander. I don't destroy, I elevate. The galaxy has been weak for too long. It's time for the strong to rule." Her eyes locked onto his, intense and unwavering. "And you're part of the old order. You'll either bend the knee or be crushed beneath the new one." Ellis's mind worked furiously, trying to come up with a plan. He knew they couldn't defeat Zlira and the Circa head-on, not without backup, and certainly not in the heart of their own ship. But there had to be something he could do, some weakness he could exploit. Before he could speak, a sharp noise echoed through the ship. A sudden explosion rocked the station, and the lights flickered wildly. Zlira's expression shifted from confidence to something far colder. She looked to her left, her gaze piercing the darkness beyond the ship's control room. "Intruders?" she muttered under her breath, her voice deadly calm. "No matter, it will take more than a few explosions to stop us." Ellis's heart skipped a beat. Could it be? Could reinforcements have arrived? Were there other factions or even humanity's own military finally taking action? Zlira, as though sensing his thoughts, turned back to him with a cold smile. "You think your forces can save you? How quaint. The Circa have already anticipated every move. This station is ours. Your so-called reinforcements are nothing more than ants marching to their death." Ellis didn't respond. Instead, he silently motioned for his team to move. They had one chance, one opportunity to act while Zlira was distracted by whatever had caused the explosion. The moment they hesitated, it would be over. They slipped deeper into the ship, careful not to make any noise. The corridors were empty, eerie in their stillness. The station, which had once been bustling with life, now felt like a haunted ghost. Ship, abandoned by everyone except the Circa and their deadly leader. As they reached a junction, the flashing lights abruptly stopped, and the ship's hum grew louder, more intense. Ellis knew this was no coincidence. Zlira had anticipated every move, but that didn't mean they were out of options yet. The explosion had triggered a system malfunction, and in the chaos, they might be able to disrupt the Circa's operations, even if only temporarily. "Commander," Vera whispered, her voice tight. "This is it. The Circa ship's core is ahead. If we can reach it, we can disable their systems, break their control over the station." Ellis nodded. "We move quickly. We don't have much time." They sprinted through the halls, each step heavier than the last, knowing that the clock was ticking down. Zlira would be coming for them. But the chaos she had caused was their only chance. They reached the core, a massive control center at the heart of the ship. As Ellis and his team moved to breach it, a voice crackled over there. "Comes. You really think you can stop me?" Zlira's voice echoed in their ears, cool and confident, as if she was speaking to them from the other side of a vast chasm. "You're already dead, Commander. You've just been too blind to see it." Before Ellis could react, the doors to the core control room slammed shut, and a powerful energy field erupted around the perimeter. They were trapped. A dark figure emerged from the shadows. Zlira. She stepped forward, her eyes glowing with a predatory gleam, and in that moment, Ellis realized the truth. Zlira wasn't just a threat to them. She was the beginning of the end. ChatGPT said. Zlira's footsteps echoed as she moved closer, her black armor gleaming under the faint flickering lights. The energy field hummed ominously, trapping Ellis and his team in the center of the core room. For a moment, the world seemed to slow. Ellis's pulse thundered in his ears as he watched the Circa commander, who seemed like nothing more than a shadow, growing taller and more imposing with each passing second. "You think you can stop the inevitable?" Zlira's voice was smooth and unhurried, every word like a death sentence. "The Circa have already won. You're merely delaying the inevitable. The galaxy will fall under our control, and you'll be a footnote in history." Ellis fought to keep his composure, his mind racing. He could feel the weight of Zlira's presence pressing down on him, almost suffocating. The Circa were merciless, and Zlira was their sharpest blade. But they still had a chance. He couldn't let her see his fear. He couldn't let her think she had already won. "You're wrong," Ellis said, his voice calm, though his heart was pounding. "You're not invincible. We'll find a way to stop you." Zlira tilted her head, as though studying him with a mixture of amusement and disdain. "Stop me? You honestly believe you can stop me? You're on my ship, Commander. In my domain, you've never had a chance." She snapped her fingers, and the room suddenly darkened. A sharp, high-pitched whine rang out as the energy field surrounding them began to pulse with an aggressive, intense light. Ellis's team tensed, their weapons raised, ready for whatever came next. "Do you think your weapons can stop me?" Zlira asked, her voice lilting with dark amusement. "I could crush you all with a thought." But Ellis was already moving. He hadn't expected to fight Zlira head-on, not in a room like this. He had hoped for a window of opportunity, a moment of distraction, and the explosion had given him just that. The malfunction in the circus ship systems had created a small vulnerability, and Ellis had a plan to exploit it. "Vera," he whispered, "is the secondary override still active?" Vera's eyes flashed at him, understanding immediately. "Yes, Commander. The circus systems are compromised. We can still reroute power to the auxiliary system. Do it, now." Ellis's voice was urgent. Vera moved quickly to the control panel, fingers flying over the keys. The room hummed with a strange energy, the field surrounding them flickering as the secondary override activated. Zlira's gaze flickered momentarily to Vera, and in that instant, Ellis lunged forward. It was a desperate move. Zlira was faster than any human he had ever encountered, and he knew it. But if they had any chance of stopping her, this was it. Zlira's eyes snapped back to him, her face hardening. "You're making a mistake, Commander." But Ellis didn't hesitate. He fired a shot, aiming directly for the control panel next to her. The blast struck, causing a ripple in the energy field, and the power suddenly flickered. For a split second, the humming stopped and Ellis saw it, the briefest window of opportunity. "Now," he shouted. Vera's hands flew over the console, rerouting power through the auxiliary channels. A massive jolt ran through the ship, shaking the walls and sending a shockwave through the core room. The energy field faltered, flickering in and out of existence. Zlira hissed in anger, her body glowing with dark energy as she began to move toward them with lightning speed. But just as she reached the group, a series of emergency doors slammed shut behind her, cutting off her path. Ellis and his team stood in the dim light of the now unstable core room. The malfunction had slowed Zlira down, but it was far from enough. She would recover, and soon. They had moments, maybe seconds, before she regained control. Ellis's heart raced, but he didn't falter. "This is our chance," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "We need to make it count." Zlira's voice sliced through the tension like a blade. "You think you've won? You think you can disrupt me? You are nothing. A tiny blip in a much larger game." Her eyes burned with a lethal fury, and her form shimmered with an ethereal darkness. "You are no match for me, Commander." Her words were heavy, laden with the weight of centuries of conquest, but Ellis had something she didn't: determination. He knew she could break through any barrier, any security. But what she couldn't control was the human will to survive, to adapt. She had underestimated them. Zlira raised her hand, energy crackling around her fingertips. In a flash, she fired. A burst of energy that shot across the room, narrowly missing Ellis as he ducked behind a pillar. The blast caused the air to scorch and the walls to crack. "Get ready," Ellis shouted, motioning for his team to spread out. They had no choice now but to face her directly. It was do or die. The ship was unstable. Every moment, it seemed like it might collapse, but they couldn't wait any longer. This was the one shot they had. They had to break through her defenses, disrupt her long enough to get the auxiliary systems back online and take control of the ship. As Zlira advanced, her movements graceful but deadly, Ellis quickly assessed the battlefield. They couldn't outfight her, but they could outsmart her. There had to be another weakness, something they could use to their advantage. "Now!" Ellis shouted again. He signaled Vera, who had already begun accessing the control panel once more. The room crackled with energy as Lyra's dark power intensified. She was ready to end this, to crush them where they stood. But as she focused her energy on Vera, Ellis took a deep breath and made his move. He sprinted forward, dodging another wave of energy, and grabbed a nearby emergency containment grenade. He pulled the pin and tossed it towards Lyra. The explosion was sudden, violent. A blinding light erupted, and Lyra was thrown back, momentarily disoriented. It was their chance. Vera hit the final command, and the energy field around them deactivated completely. For a brief, fleeting moment, they had a sliver of control. But it wouldn't last long. Lyra was already recovering, her form shimmering as she stood, enraged and undeterred. Ellis knew it was now or never. This battle was far from over, but the outcome of this struggle would determine the galaxy's fate. Lyra had only just begun. But now, for the first time, Ellis and his team had the advantage. For how long, though? That was the question. The smoke from the explosion hung in the air, thick and acrid, as Ellis and his team scrambled to maintain their position. The energy field was down, and Lyra had been momentarily thrown off balance by the blast. But Ellis knew this was only temporary. The Circa commander was already recovering, faster than any human could. Move now. Ellis shouted, pushing his team toward the far side of the room, trying to keep as much distance between them and Lyra as possible. The Circa were too fast, too powerful. But they had an advantage now. The core was vulnerable, and if they could keep Lyra distracted just a little longer, they might be able to disable the Circa ship entirely. Lyra's voice cut through the haze of the explosion, soft but venomous. You think you can defeat me with tricks and distractions, Commander? You've underestimated me for the last time. Ellis barely had time to react as Lyra's form flickered with dark energy, and she charged toward him, moving faster than the human eye could follow. He raised his weapon, but it was no use. Lyra was already upon him, her hand outstretched, ready to strike. But just as her hand was about to make contact, there was a loud hum, and the ground beneath them shook violently. The ship's core, still unstable from the initial explosion, was beginning to fail. The energy pulse had triggered a chain reaction, and the Circa's control was slipping. Lyra's eyes widened, but her expression quickly hardened into one of pure rage. No, she hissed, her voice laced with fury. You've delayed me for too long. Ellis didn't hesitate. His team moved in unison, taking advantage of the chaos. Vera fired a blast at one of the core's exposed conduits, sending a wave of electrical sparks across the room. The ship groaned, the lights flickering as if in protest. Lyra's eyes flashed, and she snarled. You cannot win, Commander, Lyra growled. The Circa will always find a way to rise above the weak. But Ellis had no intention of letting her win. I don't need to win, he said, his voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through his veins. I just need to survive. The Circa ship was failing. The auxiliary systems were online, but they could only hold the ship together for so long. They had one shot, and it was slipping through their fingers by the second. If they didn't do something, the entire station could be destroyed in the resulting implosion. Ellis's mind raced. The ship was built with advanced, near-indestructible technology, but its weaknesses were still there. The core was designed to be self-sustaining, but that self-sustainability could be compromised if enough pressure was applied. If they could overload the system, it could take Lyra's control down with it. Vera, get to the core's emergency. Shut down controls, Ellis barked. We need to release the overload sequence. If we can't stop Lyra, we at least need to stop this ship from collapsing the entire station. Vera nodded, running toward the center of the room where the main control panel stood. She had to move fast, as Lyra was closing in on them. The air seemed to thicken with each passing second, every movement amplified. Lyra raised her hand again, unleashing a torrent of energy that shot across the room, but Ellis was ready. He grabbed a nearby tool, a heavy metal bar, and hurled it toward the Circa commander. The makeshift weapon struck her arm, causing a momentary distraction, just enough to buy them time. Vera was at the control panel now, her fingers flying across the interface as the countdown to overload began. Zlira snarled, turning to face Vera, her eyes burning with rage. "You think you can destroy me?" she hissed. "I will not be defeated by the likes of you." But Vera didn't stop. She punched in the final command, and the lights on the core flickered as the emergency systems powered up. A countdown began to flash across the main screen, signaling the impending collapse of the Circa's ship systems. Ellis raised his weapon one last time, pointing it at Zlira. "We've got what we need. Time to go." But Zlira was not finished. She lunged toward Vera, but Ellis was faster. He grabbed Zlira by the arm, holding her back with all his strength. The force of their struggle sent shockwaves through the room, but Ellis held his ground. His eyes locked on the countdown timer. Zlira twisted in his grip, her voice a low growl. "You cannot win. You cannot escape." But Ellis didn't respond. He didn't need to. His mind was focused on only one thing: survival. He pushed her away with all his might, and Zlira staggered back. Just as the core reached the critical point, the explosion came without warning. A blinding flash of light filled the room, followed by the deafening roar of the ship's systems collapsing. The walls of the core room buckled under the pressure as the entire vessel began to implode. Zlira, too, was caught in the blast, her body thrown violently against the walls, her figure consumed by the raw power of the explosion. Ellis and his team barely had time to react. The shockwave hit them like a tidal wave, and the floor beneath them cracked open as the ship began to disintegrate. The last thing Ellis saw before everything went white was Vera's face, her eyes wide with terror as the countdown hit 0. Ellis woke. It was to an eerie silence. The explosion had taken everything with it: the Circa ship, Zlira, and their reign of terror. The station had been severely damaged, but the worst had been avoided. They had done it. They had survived. But at what cost? The remains of the station drifted in space, crippled but still alive. The peace talks were over, and the galaxy would never be the same. The Circa's dominance had been challenged, but the price of that challenge had been steep. Ellis stood at the edge of the broken command center, looking out into the void of space. The stars seemed distant now, unreachable. He knew that, for now, the galaxy had won a brief reprieve, but the struggle was far from over. Zlira might have been defeated, but the Circa were still out there. And this war, this fight for survival, was only just beginning.